Three-headed beast. In 71 BC, Marcus and Pompey both stood at the gates of Rome with their loyal armies nearby. Another civil war was in the air. Tension was at its peak. If another civil war would break, Rome would probably face such chaos and devastation that it would bring its very existence into question. Finally the tension was resolved, but in a way no one really expected. Pompey and Marcus decided to ally and demanded the top-tier positions as consuls for the next year. This was a reasonable move for both, even though they hated and distrusted each other. If they would work together, they could avoid situations where the Senate would set them against each other. They also complemented each other, as Pompey had massive popularity among common people, whereas Marcus had his wealth and the support of many senators and wealthy businessmen. Together they had more influence and power than the rest of the Senate combined. They probably also agreed not to veto each other's proposals which they wanted to implement, which would have meant that they had planned their program of legislation before running, so that each knew what they wanted to execute. Under the law, the requirements of running to a position of consul, one had to be at least 42 years old and had to have been a praetor for over 3 years before running. For Marcus these requirements were met, so him becoming a consul was seen just. However, for Pompey, becoming a consul was blatantly illegal, as he wasn't even a senator and only 35 years old. But with the armies of Pompey and Marcus, the Senate couldn't really refuse their requests. So in 70 BC, both men entered to serve as consuls and held victory parades. Pompey was permitted to hold a triumph for his victory in Hispania, and Marcus was rewarded with an ovation, which was a lesser triumph. A triumph could not be awarded to Marcus because it could only be given to those who had defeated a foreign enemy. Naturally, this didn't sit well with Marcus, so he did everything he could to elevate his parade. He purchased 10,000 tables for the people to feast during his parade and gave each a 3-month supply of corn. He dedicated a tenth of his assets to honor Achilles and received a special dispensation to wear a laurel crown, which was usually reserved for triumphs. There were 2 key constitutional changes during the consulships of Pompey and Marcus. The first being to restore the rights of tribune to the plebs, which was probably initiated by Pompey, since he wanted to undermine the senatorial power and also probably because he didn't have great influence among the senators. Marcus also saw the benefits of the office, as he would use it to his benefit later on. Restoring the office brought public popularity to both, since the office was the only way for the common people to directly affect the matters of state. The second constitutional change was to restore the office of censor, which was almost certainly pushed by Marcus. The office of censor was a rather strange mix of different duties. Censors would write down the names of Roman citizens and register their property. They watched over public projects which were funded by the Senate. They had to be married. They had the power of revoking senatorial status and had to oversee the eligibility of new senators. And they were allowed to feed the holy geese for the next 5 years. We can see why Marcus was interested in restoring the office. The 2 elected censors were Cornelius Lentulus and Gellius Publicola, who were the 2 consuls defeated and embarrassed by Spartacus. Likely the election was arranged during Spartacus's revolt, when they agreed to support Marcus's command against Spartacus. Even though major constitutional changes were made, it was reported that Marcus and Pompey argued a lot, which spilled out so that the public became concerned. Therefore they even held a public reconciliation, which most likely was just for show. At the end of their consulship, both refused customary governorship of a province the following year, most likely because they were aiming higher and playing for their strengths. Pompey probably was waiting for further military command, and Marcus likely wanted to stay in the center of Roman politics. In 69 BC, their consulships had ended and both returned to their respective political lives. Marcus spent the next decade in Rome consolidating and increasing his influence like he did before the Spartacus' revolt. During this period he also sponsored many young rising noblemen, Gaius Julius Caesar being one of them. Marcus secured Caesar's election to praetorship along with governorship of Hispania. In addition, Marcus gave bribes so that Caesar would become Rome's chief priest, the Pontifex Maximus. In the meantime, Pompey used the tribune of the plebs to assign him to two great military commands. First of them being to end the pirate activity in Mediterranean Sea, which he successfully concluded in few months. The second was the command in war against the king of Pontus, Mithridates IV. One of Marcus's failed endeavors when he ran and gained the office of censor. During his censorship he initiated two major policies which were to grant citizenship to the people living in the northern Italy and annexation of Egypt. Both proposals likely went through the restored office of tribune of the plebs. The annexation of Egypt was a very interesting proposal, as Egypt had been willed to Rome by Ptolemy X, but so far the claim had not been pressed by Rome. Likely Marcus hoped he would be assigned as commander if Egypt would be annexed. Marcus, however, faced fierce opposition to both of these policies, especially to the annexation of Egypt. One of the opposing individuals was Cicero. Against such opposition, Marcus had to abandon his policy proposals and resign from the office of censor. In 63 BC, Pompey was returning from his successful eastern campaigns, and he was guaranteed to have a hostile reception from the Senate, as he had used the tribune of the plebs to usurp the eastern campaigns. Pompey needed land for his soldiers and the Senate to ratify his eastern settlement. Therefore, Pompey was able to ensure one of his lieutenants as consuls for the next 2 years. However, the Senate also ensured one of its men to be paired with Pompey's consuls in order to frustrate Pompey's plans. Marcus also opposed these plans, therefore Pompey's plans failed. In 60 BC, Caesar returned to Rome from Hispania seeking consulship. By this time, both Marcus and Pompey needed to implement their policies. Caesar promised to deliver these, and he got the full support of Pompey and Marcus. Therefore, Caesar was easily selected as consul, but the Senate once again made sure that one of its own stout supporters of the senatorial power would be the second consul. The Senate elected Calpurnius Bilpulus to be Caesar's fellow consul. For Pompey this must have seemed to be another year of frustration. However, the situation had changed. This time Marcus was ready to work with Pompey to get his own policies through, and Caesar was exceptionally talented and capable politician. Through bribery, intimidation and violence, Caesar was able to reduce Bibulus to house arrest, and so Caesar was able to deliver his promises to Marcus and Pompey. Added to this, Caesar managed to secure himself the governorship of 2 provinces in Gaul for a period of 5 years. This paved the way for his future successors. After Caesar's term as consul was over, he went to take up his governorship of Gaul, and quickly started a lengthy military campaign there. Meanwhile, both Marcus and Pompey were in Rome for a long time, which is the main reason why Rome started to become a violent place to be. Armed political gangs were controlling the streets, following the orders of their chief, Publius Claudius. He launched multiple attacks on senior politicians, especially Pompey. At times Pompey was virtually besieged in Rome because of the gangs. Marcus, of course, was behind this, as he supported Claudius but didn't necessarily order his every action. Eventually Pompey founded his own street gangs, and Claudius soon had to back down. In 58 BC, a civil war erupted in Egypt, and the Egyptian king Ptolemy XII fled to Rome. Through bribes, the Senate confirmed him as the rightful king, and the road of invading Egypt was now open. However, the Senate couldn't agree who it would appoint leading the Ptolemy's restoration campaign. Marcus and Pompey both wanted to lead it, but the Senate didn't want to give it to them to prevent them from increasing their wealth and influence any further. And because Pompey and Marcus used their influence to prevent anyone else getting the command, the matter was in a deadlock. This matter showed that the Senate couldn't make any decisions on some major issues, which made Marcus and Pompey look increasingly irrelevant. In the meanwhile, Caesar had done splendidly well in Gaul and already controlled vast amount of territories. The campaign could not be finished before his command would expire, and the Senate would probably give the campaign to another general, thus stealing his glory. Added to that, Caesar would most likely face prosecution on his actions as a consul when he aggressively pushed policies through the Senate in 59 BC. Caesar wanted to avoid this, and reached out to Marcus and Pompey to form an alliance to get his extension and avoid prosecutions. Naturally, this wouldn't be an easy affair, as both Marcus and Pompey would not give out any favors for free, and by his success Caesar had become a rival to them both. The three would meet and change the direction of a Roman Republic. In April 56 BC, in northern Italy, Rome's three most powerful men arrived in a sunny town of Luca. They were hardly alone, as 200 senators accompanied them, which showed just how much influence these three rivals had. Last time when these three men worked together, there was talk of three-headed beast, but back then Caesar was clearly the lesser man of the three. Now the beast has again taken form, but this time on more equal footing. The question of this meeting was what Marcus and Pompey would get out of this alliance. Pompey would remain in Rome, receiving 2 provinces in Hispania, and his man Gabinius would be recalled from Syria, where he was intervening in Parthian civil war to restore Ptolemy in Egypt. Marcus would replace Gabinius in Syria for 5 years, get the permission to raise 7 legions, and the right to wage war without requesting permission from the Senate. Clearly, Marcus's grand idea was to invade Parthia. To make this agreement a reality, Marcus and Pompey seized consulship once again and passed these bills through the public assembly. And so, for the first time, Roman Republic was effectively divided between 3 men who were also dictating foreign policy. The Roman Republic was a republic only in formal sense. The stage was set for final act, for Marcus. Join us for next time as we see how Marcus's Eastern campaign begins. Thank you for watching. This has been Skinkapampa and Knighty. So long!